We're picking up again in Matthew 26. We're wading through this part of Matthew quite slowly. There's so many details about Jesus' life, and this is the culmination of what we've been looking for all through the Old Testament. And so we see here that Peter has just cut, we don't know from Matthew who cut off his ear, but one of those following Jesus, we find out from John, was Peter, cut off the ear of one of the guards that came. And we actually find out in the other gospel that in John, I think it is, that Jesus heals the guy's ear. But he tells Peter, don't use the sword or you'll perish by the sword. And then he says, how then, verse 54, how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen this way? This is the key that's going through here. This is, all of this stuff is to show that Jesus truly was the one who was prophesied about in the Old Testament. I mean, if you really could take this and just look at it objectively, all of the different prophecies that were given regarding Jesus' birth, his life, and his death, the resurrection, all of those things, and you look at it, there are just so many. And this section, Matthew 26, 27, 28, especially 26 and 27, are just full of references, either spoken directly or implied references to the Old Testament. So we're looking there, and we get to verse 56. It says, but all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled. Then all the disciples left him and fled. He had just said, all of you are going to be, going to leave me, and that was a prophecy that was quoted out of Zechariah, I believe. And then here it happens in verse 56, they actually do that. So we're in 57, and Jesus is brought before Caiaphas. Now, Caiaphas is the high priest. It says in 57, and those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. But Peter also was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. So Peter, is curious. I mean, he's wanting to stand up for Jesus. He's trying to do his best to be a faithful follower, and it says so he's following him in there to just kind of see what's going to happen here. What's the outcome going to be? And it says at verse 59, now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus in order that they might put him to death. So they found a lot of false witnesses. They came up with all kinds of charges. They even made, big deal out of it. He said, I'll destroy this temple and raise it up in 3 days again. He was talking about his body, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. And they thought he was talking about the physical temple. And they thought that was like a really criminal thing to say. I don't get, their whole thing, but they're desperate to try and find something to accuse Jesus of. So we get to verse 63. Jesus was staying silent, and then verse 63, but Jesus kept silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said it, or you said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, this lit him up. When he said, you're going to see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Well, he's talking about a quote out of Daniel that they all took to be the Son of Man, the Messiah, who would come, who would obtain an eternal kingdom that would never pass away. He'd come on the clouds. And so he says this in answer to, are you the Christ? I adjure you by the living God. Tell us. And he says, so you're going to see me coming on the right hand of glory in clouds, coming on the clouds of heaven. Well, verse 65 gets the reaction. Then the high priest tore his robes, saying, he is blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? So he finally, we got him. This is it. Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They answered and said, he is deserving of death. So they come to this conclusion. Jesus basically said, yes, I'm the Messiah. I mean, it's pretty plain here. And he said, because he quotes that passage out of Daniel just to emphasize that. Verse 67, it says they spat in his face. I don't use the word spat very often, but they spit at him. They spit in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you? It was amazing here. When you get somebody, you've seen it when people, there's this mob mentality when somebody gets accused, or sometimes somebody is getting beat up, and sometimes others don't even know why. They just go and start it. Well, everyone started doing whatever. They were beating him, hitting him, whatever. We see a lot of things that took place here. They spit on him. They slapped him and said, prophesy. Who hit you? Just the mockery that was going on. So Peter then, he just came along to see what the outcome would be. In verses 69 through 75 of chapter 26, Peter actually denies that he even knows Jesus. He's picked up because he's like, you talk like one of those guys, one of his followers, and he keeps going on, and Jesus had told him earlier, that he would deny him. Peter wasn't going to buy that. He's not going to deny him. But it finally came down to, and there's a girl that comes up, and bystanders came up to him. Surely you too are one of them, for the way that you talk gives you away. It says, then he began to curse and swear, I do not know the man. And immediately a cock crowed. So Jesus had told him that he would deny him 3 times before a cock crowed. And here he curses and swears, I don't know him. I don't even know him. Here's this faithful follower. What a horrible moment for Peter. I can just imagine what he was going through at this time. It says, verse 75, Peter remembered the word which Jesus said, before a cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. And we're going to have a contrast here. Just right here, we've got a transition from chapter 26 to 27. Peter really blows it. And we move right into chapter 27, and Judas, who just sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, comes back, and he says, verse 1, now when morning had come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him up to Pilate the governor. Then when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. So here Judas was feeling really bad about this. It uses a word here, remorse, translated in my translation, and it's kind of the regret or sorrow, or you're kind of the same thing as repent, but it's not. It's a word. The word here is metamelomai in the Greek, and the word for repent usually is metanoeo or metanoia, the noun form, and so there's a little difference. And what Judas was feeling here was just more the regret, the remorse. There wasn't really the change that took place, that was going to take place in Peter, where he turns and he actually receives kind of the pardon from Jesus and turns to him and realizes, hey, I don't have anything to offer. Jesus accepts me anyway. Here, it seems like Judas was counting on his own goodness somehow, and when he realized that he wasn't good, it just drove him so far that he killed himself. And he didn't give any chance for Jesus to reinstate him or affirm him. And then it goes on, the chief priests took the silver. It's not lawful, they said, to put it into the treasury. So in verse 8 it says, for this reason verse 7, and they counseled together, and with the money bought the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. And we see that prophecy in Zechariah once again talked about the potter's field. In verse 9, then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one whose price had been set by the sons of Israel. They gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. And so here it says, it brings out that passage, which was actually from Zechariah. But the reason it would say Jeremiah here is because the prophetic books in that time were put into sections, and that section, I guess the Jeremiah book was or the Zechariah book prophecy was with the Jeremiah section of prophecy. So it's just like us saying in the Bible, there it was in Jeremiah. Well, it was in the prophets, and but it was actually Zechariah who prophesied that. And so they bought that field with the price of the silver, and all of that stuff is being fulfilled. So once again, we see here Jesus is fulfilling all of this stuff. That's why we're taking a little more time wading through this. And then verse 11 says, now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, I think probably it'd just be, you say, or it is as you say. It's like, you said it. Are you king of the Jews? You said it.